spoke calmly, Mrs. Kim frowned. What do you mean you need time? You're married, isn't that enough? See, Wine, I don't know anything. I just want to hold my grandchild as soon as possible. Her tone was stern. Wine furrowed her brows. I understand it, but that's a personal matter between me and him. I want to get familiar with him in this house first, she said in a low tone. Mrs. Kim stared at her with unpleasant expressions when she saw Theon, who came towards them after declining a call. Mom, if you are done to talk to her, then we must return to our room. I and Wine both are tired due to the event today. He spoke lazily. See, Theon, I just want you both to give me a grandchild. You must consummate your marriage tonight. With a frown, Theon glanced at Wine, who was biting her lips. Mom, I and Wine have discussed it. None of us is ready for it. We'll think about it once we get along well and are familiar, he said in a serious tone. I'm sorry to say, but I don't think you have any right to pressure us. It's our life and matter. You sure will get a grandchild, but not until I get comfortable and do not feel like a stranger anymore. Her voice carried a hint of determination. You're talking back to me. See, then you just got married today and she's already not respecting me. Come on, Mom. How can Wine disrespect you? She's right. We both need some time. You must respect her decision. He spoke softly and tapped Mrs. Kim's face, who was staring at him with an unpleasant expression. Why did I get you married, Mom? You mean you live like strangers? Kids these days. She freed from his grip and walked away. Then ran his fingers through his hair and turned to face Wine. Let's get to the room, you must be tired. She nodded and followed him quietly to the room. Wine freshened up and came out while Theon had already changed and was reclining on the couch. I'm sorry for my mom's behavior, Wine. He sat straight and said in a low tone. Wine sat on the bed. It's okay, I can understand. She spoke, fidgeting her fingers, then stared at her for a while and then stood to switch off the lights. I'll take the couch, you can sleep on the bed. We can share the bed if you are comfortable. Theon turned towards her. Are you sure? Because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. She shook her head. I just don't want to take further steps in our relationship. I didn't say we live like strangers, she said, moving to the other side of the bed. He switched off the lights and lied at the edge of the bed. Wine let out a soft chuckle lying beside him. I don't bite, you'll fall. Theon stared at her smile in a daze. Startled, feeling her touch on his arm, he scooted closer to her and closed his eyes. Wine's heartbeat raced wildly. She closed her eyes without letting off his arm. Both of them felt a sense of warmth spreading throughout their body. 1 month later, the way Theon made Wine feel home had her drooling over him. His calm and soft personality caused her to think how she got so lucky to have someone like him. Theon handles his mom's constant tantrums so well that even Mrs. Kim couldn't stay mad at him. Mrs. Kim is good with Wine unless she reminisces about how badly she yearns for a grandchild. Now they were having breakfast when Theon spoke. Wine, should I drive you to the office? He asked in a low tone. No, I can go on my own. Your office is far, don't bother, she said with a smile. Mrs. Kim furrowed her brows. What office? What do you mean? She asked, glaring at them suspiciously. Wine has joined back her office. Wine bit her lips nervously. Rather than taking care of your husband and his responsibility, you are joining the office. Seeing a grandchild in this life will be just my desire. She shook her head with disbelief. I am responsible for taking care of her. She's my responsibility. I am not her responsibility. If I don't have a problem with her, then why are you making a fuss out of it, Mom? He asked in a displeased tone. But Mom, it's just for a few months. They opened his mouth to speak again, but Wine held his hand and motioned him to stay quiet. In these few months of yours, some other girl would have taken away your husband. Every man needs his wife's attention and solace with her. If he doesn't find it with her, then he goes to someone else. Theon has tons of beautiful girls around him the whole day. She spoke without taking a breath. Theon stared at his mom with disbelief while Wine's grasp on his hand tightened while a sense of uneasiness settled in her heart. What are you saying, Mom? He glanced at Wine and stood. Let's go, Wine, I'll drop you. But she stopped and nodded. Okay, give me a few moments. I'll bring my bag. I'll be waiting out there. He walked out, bidding goodbye to Mrs. Kim and kissing her on the cheeks. but regretted instantly. Then raised his brows amazingly and moved closer to her. Are you still thinking about what Mom said? He asked. She nodded as yes, but soon shook her head in denial. Then chuckled, holding her wrist and pulling her closer. Forget it, let's go. Her face turned crimson. She tried to break free from his grip, but Then's grip was firm. My secretary is a female. Her expressions turned anxious. Trust me, you'll only be my one and wife. He brushed his fingers against her cheek gently. Wine nodded, feeling embarrassed all over. I'm stupid to ask such silly questions. Everyone has female employees. That doesn't mean they have feelings for each other. Then nodded with a smile. Let's go, we'll be late. She held his hand. Then was surprised as she never touched him until Then did. He didn't want her to do something against her will, just because she felt insecure. Time skip. Wine's insecurities and overthinking have taken over her, while her boss also gives her a hard time since she has joined back. She would give her tons of files to complete in a few hours. Wine barely gets to see Then as she mostly arrives late at night. Today she had a severe headache and arrived home earlier than usual only to have a guest. Hey Wine, come meet Wendy. She's my best friend's daughter. Wendy greeted her with a shy smile. Wine smiled back in response. And Wendy, as you know, she's Wine, my daughter-in-law. Nice to meet you, Wendy, she said softly. Same here. She averted her gaze to Mrs. Kim. Mom, I'll go and change. Yeah, go ahead. We'll be waiting for you in the dining room. Has Then returned yet? She asked as she didn't see his car. Mrs. Kim shook her head in denial. No, he might be on his way. Wine nodded and exhaustedly went to their shared bedroom. After a few minutes she came when she saw exhausted Then walking towards the bedroom. As soon as he saw her, his lips curled into a smile while his eyes lit. Hey, you early today? He approached her and embraced her in a hug, which Wine returned. Both of them felt their exhaustion melted away. Yes, I managed to get rid of the bowl early, she muttered, inhaling his collar and tightening her grip around him. Then smiled, knowing she was getting along with him. Too good, we can spend time together. He pulled out and placed a kiss on her forehead. For real, go and change, dinner is ready. He patted her cheek with a smile and walked away while Wine made her way to the dining room. Mrs. Kim and Wendy were immersed in a conversation. Mrs. Kim began telling Wine how close Then was to Wendy when she was young. Wine felt an tinge of uneasiness settled in her chest. Soon Then joined them. I see who is here, little Wendy, he said with a smile and ruffled her hair, causing Wendy to almost blush, and stared at them with an unpleasant expression. They ate in silence until Mrs. Kim spoke. Then Wendy will stay with us until her parents return and they settle here. Wine snapped her head in their direction. I have told Mom to book me a hotel here, she spoke in a low tone. Wine stared at her, she seemed too young and innocent. It's okay, Wendy, you can stay here as long as your parents are abroad. She nodded with a smile and lowered her head. After a while they called it a day and walked to their bedrooms. Wine was reclining on the bed, lost in deep thoughts, when Theo entered with a mug in his hand. Here, take this. He handed her the tea. She looked at him in surprise. What? I know you're having a terrible headache, that's why your mood is dry. He sat beside her and took her hand while Wine placed the mug on the nightstand. Thank you so much, I really needed it. He squeezed his hands. How do you know I have a headache? I can read you. He spoke calmly, staring at her with a hint of affection, his gaze filled with love. Wine was lost, staring at him as if he were a mesmerizing work of art. You don't have to be worried about Wendy. She's just a young girl, she grew up in my hands. Wine realized he knew what she was thinking about Wendy. I liked kids a lot and she was the only kid near us. I have always treated her as a little sister. Wine's face flushed. She bit her lips. Do you still like kids? He nodded with a smile. Yes, I do. She leaned closer and placed her head on his shoulder. He caressed her hair gently. the driver drove him. I can think about it. He hummed a response, kissing her hair. Few days later. It's been more than 15 days since Wendy is living with them. Wayne got along with her. She likes Wendy as she's an innocent and shy little girl. A few days ago, Wendy's mother came and Wayne heard her suggesting to Mrs. Kim to get them married to someone else or perhaps to Wendy. Wayne gritted her teeth and walked away scared to hear Mrs. Kim's reply. Stop mentioning that again and again, Sina. They are both happy together. I don't want to ruin anyone's happiness. Mrs. Kim said with a frown. That girl would never give you a grandchild. You could have waited for us. My Wendy is perfect for him. Mrs. Kim's frown deepened. Sina, Wayne is perfect for my Them. As for Wendy, Them has always seen her as a sister. Please don't mention this again. I want a grandchild, but that doesn't mean I'll force them or split them apart. She shook her head in disbelief. Wendy scoffed and walked away. The Wayne came out of the study room with a heavy heart. She made her way to the kitchen but held up seeing Them and Wendy, even though they were just talking about something, but for some reason she felt her chest heavy. She quietly turned around and walked away. What do you want to say? Speak up, he asked in a serious tone. My mom has suggested to your mom about your second marriage. I think only heard about it. That's why she's locked in the room. Them pinched the bridge of his nose. He just returned from office and changed looking for Wayne, but she was nowhere. What's wrong with your mom? Why does she poke her nose in everyone's business? He spoke furiously. Wendy was too embarrassed to mention whom her mother suggests. She has always seen him as a brother. I'll try to talk to her, but it would be much better if you talk to her. She won't dare to mention it again. Then nodded and patted her head. Thank you for informing me. I'll talk to her now. It's okay, Wendy is perfect for you. I like her very much. So do I. Wendy giggled. His tone was filled with love with the mention of wine. Drop me as well. I have packed my everything and I'm sorry for bothering you all for almost a month. They nodded while his mind was drawn to wine. He felt a terrible headache setting in. Upon meeting Wendy's mother, his blood boiled in rage as she suggested Wendy told him. He furiously warned her not to interfere in his personal life again. Now he arrived home and plopped on the bed rubbing his temples. He knew Wayne must be in the study room. He was about to stand up when the door opened, revealing Wayne. Her face and eyes were red as if she had cried. Where were you? He asked, sitting straight. Shouldn't I be the one asking you this? She asked in a serious tone and moved closer to him. I went to drop Wendy. She wanted to meet you, but you didn't open the door for her. He spoke softly. Wayne clenched her fist. So you feel bad for her. After all, she's your soon-to-be wife. She spoke through gritted teeth. Then furrowed his brows and stood in front of her and tried to reach out to her, but she stepped away. What are you saying? She's like a sister to me. Wayne cut in. As a sister. Is that why you're so close to her? Shut up, Wayne. What's wrong with you? He raised his voice, glaring at her deadly. Wayne bit her lips and turned around to leave. Then let out a sigh and held her arm. Listen to me, Wayne. He pulled her closer and lifted her face with his forefinger. I know you're upset because of Wendy's mom, but that doesn't mean you should suspect me and overthink unreasonably. Did I say I want to marry? She shook her head in denial and sniffed. He wiped her tears. Don't you trust me? I do. If you do, then you wouldn't have said that. She held his hands. I didn't mean that. Whatever you meant. I want you to overcome your insecurities. You matter me the most. Have trust in me. I'm giving you a chance rather than getting mad at you. He cupped the side of her cheeks. She nodded. I'm sorry, she mumbled, hugging him. I didn't suspect you. I just didn't like you being close to Wendy. I know she's not a bad girl, but I can't stand anyone near you. You're mine. She sniffed. Hank smiled, caressing her hair. Trust me, I'm all yours. She placed her chin on his chest and tilted her head upward. I decided to resign. I don't want to work anymore. She spoke calmly, grazing his cheek. Why? Did something happen? She shook her head in denial. Nothing happened. I don't want to waste our precious time in office. Since I joined the office, we barely see each other. Are you sure? If something is bothering you, tell me. He spoke lovingly. Then why don't we have a baby? He raised his brows while Wayne's face turned crimson. She lowered her face, burying her head in his chest. Why so suddenly? Is it because of Mom? I assure you she's fine. No, I have taken my time. We can have a baby. I went into a deep thought Listen, Wine, I don't want you to force yourself because of your insecurities. We'll think about it later. He said, moving to the bed along with Wine and plopping on it. Wine propped on her elbows and touched his nose. I know you like kids and I'm not forcing myself. He lazily shook his head and closed his eyes. Damn, he hummed in response. I think I'm falling for you. He opened his eyes and raised his brows. Well, who will not fall for you? You're all in one. Theon chuckled, shaking his head. Well, then it means I fell first. She grinned and leaned to kiss his forehead. But that doesn't mean I agree with you. We'll have lots of kids once I'm assured you're comfortable enough with me. What do you mean by lots of kids? How much do you plan? She rested her head on his chest, hearing his heartbeat. I mean tones of his book decently. No way 3 are enough. Alright, let's add 2 more and make it 5. She lightly slapped his chest. I'm tired, good night, he mumbled with closed eyes. Wine propped once more and reached out to kiss his eyes, causing him to smile. Good night. Few months later, Wine is 6 months pregnant. With Theon by her side, she overcome all her insecurities about their relationship. She feels like the luckiest woman on this earth. Mrs. Kim is beyond happy after learning about Wine's pregnancy. Now Wine was sitting and crying continuously while Mrs. Kim sighed for the 100th time. Come on, Wine, it's not a big deal, stop crying. She spoke softly. Wine sniffed and looked at her. Why, Theon hasn't returned yet, she said between hiccups. Mrs. Kim held back her laughter, seeing her cry for silly reason. He's on his way. I know he doesn't like me anymore. That's why he arrives late at night. She stopped crying and said in a low tone. Mrs. Kim shook her head with a smile and handed her a glass of water. Drink it, you'll feel good. Wait for Theon to return. I'll teach him a good lesson for arriving late. Wine gulped down the water quietly. Soon Theon arrived and rushed to her. What's wrong, Wine? Why were you crying so badly on call? He glanced at his mom worriedly, who shrugged her shoulders and walked away. Theon, I was cooking for you, she said between hiccups. He nodded, urging her to speak further. I sat for a while and the food went. Theon let out a sigh of relief. You got me worried. I thought God knows what happened. He shook his head. It's okay, let it be. Wine stared at him for a while and began sobbing silently. What happened? You mean I make you worry for no reason? I'm a troublemaker. Oh God, Wine, I never said that. He engulfed her in a hug, but she wiggled in his grip, breaking it free and walked to their shared bedroom. Theon followed her. Wine stopped crying. He embraced her once more, but this time she didn't resist. You don't like me anymore because I look like an elephant. She was throwing tantrums while he listened to her with soft smile. Who said you look like an elephant? You're my panda. She slapped his chest. You mean I'm fat? Not at all, you're just like a panda, cute. He placed a soft kiss on her forehead. Wine let out a sigh and lifted her head to look at him. I'm sorry for bothering you so much. I don't know what happens to me, she mumbled embarrassedly, then smiled and shook his head. Don't be sorry, you don't bother me in any way. She smiled and pecked his lips. Thank you so much. She took a deep breath and rested her head on his chest. Just a few months and we'll see our little one. He placed his hand gently on her belly. Wine nodded, closing her eyes. Time flew by and soon the day arrived when Wine was giving birth. Theon was pacing back and forth in the hallway, drenched in a cold sweat. Sit down, Theon, they'll be fine. Mrs. Kim held his hand. Mom, what's taking so long? Why aren't they saying anything? Wine must be in a lot of pain. He mumbled worriedly. Mrs. Kim cupped his face. Come on, Theon, I thought you were strong. Every woman goes through this. Keep calm. He nodded and hugged her, hiding his face in her embrace like a kid. Mrs. Kim shook her head with a smile. After a while, the doctor came out with a baby. Congratulations, Mr. Kim. You're blessed with a baby boy. Theon moved forward and gently held the baby. Can I see my wife? How is she? He asked anxiously. Yes, once we shift her to the general ward, you can see her, she said with a smile and walked away. hand gently. I can't describe my happiness, she said, caressing the little one's back. I feel the same way. He pressed his forehead against hers and stared at the baby with love and affection. The door opened, revealing Mrs. Kim. Congratulations, swine, she said through teary eyes and moved closer to them. I'm so happy for both of you. Fan sat back holding the baby while Mrs. Kim went towards Swine and kissed her in the forehead. Thank you, Mom, she said with a smile. I have called your parents, they'll be here soon. Wine nodded, staring at him and the baby.